Yeah, what's the word? Leroy, what's the word? Leroy, hey, what's the word? Leroy, what's the word? Leroy, hey.
Let's talk about something that doesn't get addressed enough in school leadership. The teacher's lounge, not the physical space, but what it represents. The conversations, the venting, the frustrations, the opinions about students, staff, leadership, and decisions. And here's the truth. As an assistant principal or principal, you cannot live there. Now, let me be clear. Building relationships with staff matters. Being approachable matters. Being human matters. Laughing, connecting, and having real conversations. That matters. But there is a line. And when that line gets blurred, leadership gets compromised. Because the moment you become one of the group in the wrong way, you lose something. You lose objectivity. You lose credibility. And in some cases, you lose trust. Let's talk about what this actually looks like. Scenario 1. You're in the lounge. Teachers are venting about a student. He's always causing problems. She never listens. That kid is just disrespectful. And in the moment, it might feel easy to agree, to nod your head, to add a comment, to be part of the conversation. But here's the problem. The moment you join that conversation, you've shifted your role. You're no longer the leader who supports all students. Now you're part of the narrative. And that matters because later, when that same student is in your office, you need to be objective. You need to lead with fairness. And if staff sees you as someone who participates in those conversations, it changes how they view your decisions. Scenario 2. Staff is frustrated with another teacher. They don't do their job. They're always late. They never follow through. And again, it's easy to listen, maybe even agree. But now you've stepped into something dangerous because as a leader, it is your responsibility to address concerns, not participate in side conversations, because here's what happens. The same people you laugh with in the lounge will expect you to handle situations in their favor later. And when you don't, now you're inconsistent. Now you're the problem. Now you're playing favorites or switching up. That's why boundaries matter. Let's define it clearly. Boundaries are not about being distant. They're about being intentional. You can be friendly without being too familiar. You can be supportive without being involved in everything. You can be present without being pulled into conversations that compromise your role. Now let's talk about ethics, because this is where leadership really shows. You have access to information that others don't. Student situations, staff performance, parent concerns, discipline decisions. And people will test that. They'll ask questions. They'll try to get information. They'll say things like, just between us. But as a leader, there is no just between us. There is professionalism. There is confidentiality. There is trust. Let me give you a real example. A teacher asks, hey, what's going on with that situation with that student? And you know the full story. You could share a little. You could explain it. But the right response is, I can't go into details, but we're handling it. That protects the student. That protects the process. And that protects your integrity. Now let's talk about professionalism. Because everything you do is being watched, not in a negative way, but because people are trying to understand who you are as a leader. How do you handle frustration? How do you speak about others? How do you respond under pressure? Because your behavior sets the standard. If you engage in negative talk, that becomes acceptable. If you blur lines, others will too. If you stay grounded, respectful, and professional, that becomes the culture. Let's go back to the teacher's lounge. Does that mean you never go in? No. It means you go in with purpose, you connect, you check in, you build relationships. But you don't stay in conversations that pull you out of your role. Sometimes that means redirecting. Sometimes that means staying quiet. Sometimes that means removing yourself. And yes, sometimes that feels uncomfortable. But leadership is not about comfort. It's about responsibility. Here's the reality. You can't lead people effectively if you're trying to be liked by everyone, because leadership requires hard decisions. It requires accountability. It requires moments where not everyone agrees with you. And if your leadership is built on being one of the group, it will fall apart the moment you have to make a tough call. So, what should you do instead? Be visible, but be intentional. Be supportive, but be professional. Be approachable, but maintain boundaries. Build relationships through respect, not gossip. Build trust through consistency, not agreement. Build culture through your actions, not just your words. Because at the end of the day, your role is bigger than any one conversation. You are responsible for students. You are responsible for staff. You are responsible for the culture of your building. And that requires a level of discipline that not everyone will understand. So the next time you find yourself in that space, ask yourself, am I leading right now, or am I blending in? Because great leaders know when to step in and when to step back. And when you lead with boundaries, ethics, and professionalism, you don't just protect your role, you strengthen your impact.
Yeah, what's the word? Leroy, what's the word? Leroy, hey, what's the word? Leroy, what's the word? Leroy, hey.